Dr. Michael Chen. He's a director of Harborview Medical Center Cardiology Heart Institute Clinic, and also associate professor of medicine. And also, he's very active, in clinical practice at the Harborview Medical Center. So, Michael, welcome and thank you so much for taking on this faculty spotlight presentation. It's all yours. Would you like to share your screen?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Okay, so this is actually a really difficult quote talk to put together. I struggled to think of what anything I might say about me would be of interest to anybody else, but I have enjoyed everyone else's spotlight, so hopefully mine won't be too um, boring for anybody. I also, you will notice, have no dates or years in my presentation, but events that happened in the years that I'm talking about. So you can, if you know what year they happened in, you can figure out when I did what. So I was born under the W of the Hollywood sign. No, not, but in Los Angeles, the year that Aretha Franklin's Respect was released. I was actually born in the first Kaiser hospital built in Los Angeles. My parents still had my Kaiser Health Plan card, which my dad sent me a picture of. That's me. At the time, my dad was a faculty member in economics at UCLA, and growing up in LA till I was 10, we spent many weekends, days on the UCLA campus, which is kind of like a giant park, if you've ever been there or seen it, riding my dirt bike around or skateboard. This is Bunch Hall, which is where his office was, and from the roof of which we would occasionally throw paper airplanes to see how far we could get them to go. When I was about 10, we moved to another city the year that Grease was released. I'm going to show you a few pictures of the city. Didn't actually live in the city, but near this city. See if you can figure out what city it is before there's a dead giveaway, which is the Liberty Bell. So it was the Philadelphia area, actually a suburb of Philadelphia that we moved to. So I was there from middle school and high school, played a lot of Frisbee and tennis, became a certified lifeguard. And after high school, the year of the Live Aid concerts. I don't know if any of you have heard of or remember. These were a big deal, and were benefits for hunger in Africa. So I, with my friends, attended the one that was in Philadelphia. Excuse me. Simultaneously, there was one at Wembley Stadium in London. Arrived at Haverford College, where I played volleyball, and was actually a psychology major, which is something that I hadn't had any exposure to, a field I hadn't had any exposure to in high school. Nowadays, there are a lot more different types of courses that students are able to take in high school, and it was more traditional at that time. And so I explored a lot of different subjects, and was really interested in psychology, in part because of a professor I had. This is Sid Perlow. And one of the things that is a little bit of a theme in this presentation is various mentors that I've had over the years. So Sid Perlow was this wonderful professor, very engaging, taught about the biological bases of behavior, and in particular evolution and human behavior. And I actually became his research assistant. And he had spent a number of years studying social behavior among Japanese macaques. and had collected many hours of video footage that I was coding for mothering behaviors. So that was a very influential thing. I ended up doing my senior research project on facial expressions of emotion when alone. This is not from my study, but he was very supportive. And in fact, I ended up presenting the findings at the Eastern Psychological Association. So kind of my first academic work product. And that was very influential. So I wanted to continue that work. And so I ended up going to the University of Michigan. Yes, I'm one of the Michigan Mafia that's here at UW. Went to Michigan to pursue a PhD in social psychology, again, to study more aspects of evolution, human behavior. I arrived there the same year that Nelson Mandela was released from prison and that Bush 1 signed the Americans with Disabilities Act. Through my master's thesis, I was continuing along this path. And I arrived 1 year before the Fab Five. Around the time I was finishing my master's thesis, a number of medical problems happened to folks in my family, most of which, or many of which, were sort of problems of older people. And so sort of by necessity, I became interested in medicine and geriatrics in particular, and I decided at that point to pursue medicine. But I was still interested in psychology and wanted to finish out my degree. So I changed the focus of my research and worked on my dissertation, having already finished the coursework. Changed the focus of my dissertation research to study age and gender influences on patient-physician interaction. And because I hadn't been a pre-med major in college, I had to take the pre-med courses while I was working on my dissertation, which actually ended up working out really well because I had a fellowship that was paying for my grad school, and that also paid for any other courses that I wanted to take. And as an additional bonus, graduate students were allowed to register for any class before the undergrad. So I was able to get all of the sort of prime professors and lab times and so forth. And that kind of balance was actually worked really well because, you know, if I was hitting a wall with writing, I would have something else to distract me with in terms of those pre-med classes. So I decided, or I had to, of course, apply to medical school, and I was fortunate to be admitted to Michigan and stayed there for medical school. The interest in geriatric medicine also turns out to be a little bit passed down from my dad, who, although he, or to be specific about his work in economics, dealt for his whole career on economic issues of the elderly. And these are some of his books. And I, of course, remember him mostly, and he is still alive, mostly just for being my dad. But we had always heard about economic and other social issues affecting older patients or older people. And so I think that had a significant impact on me. So I started medical school the year that OJ was acquitted, and had a number of thoughtful members of the geriatrics division at Michigan who were supportive and let me have lots of experiences with the geriatricians. My first inpatient month was medicine and specifically cardiology. It was a really terrific experience. this gentleman here, who some of you probably recognize, was my attending. There were two cardiology teams, both were Q3 alternating days on call, and just had a wonderful team and a lot of fun, and a lot of sleepless nights, but really rewarding experience. And at the end of the rotation, and this is Kim Eagle, if those of you who don't know him, and he sort of made his name initially with perioperative risk evaluation and risk reduction and things like the IRAD, aortic dissection registry, and is prominent in the ACC. He sat down with me and said, "So, what are you interested in doing?" And I said, that I had come to medical school because I was interested in geriatrics, but that I really had loved this month of cardiology, the pathophysiology, all the treatments and so forth. And he said, "Well, you know what, you should do both, because the future of our field is older patients with cardiovascular disease." And so that, of course, made a big impact on me. And that was what I decided to pursue. And sort of his influence didn't stop there. He said, you should think about getting involved in some research. And he had access to various databases and mentored me through writing this not very high impact article. It's actually a journal that I don't think is even published anymore, but was a really good experience for me, and my first publication on acute coronary syndromes in older patients. So at the towards the end of medical school, obviously I had to go through the match, and was focusing on places that had strong geriatrics and cardiology programs, and obviously, or maybe not obviously, but came here for my further training, and arrived the year that Shakespeare in Love won Best Picture, and also, unfortunately, the year of the Columbine school shooting. Coming to Seattle was sort of, in a way, coming home, because my parents actually met and were married here in Seattle, while my grandfather was a political science professor at UW. He was an expert on Chinese history and political thought. These are some of his works. And that's my mom, who was the only woman in her architecture class here at the UW. This is to remind me that I have a lot of other relatives here in Seattle, aunts, uncles, and cousins. This is all of us sitting on this bench. I am the cuter of the two boys in the middle, having peaked early. This is just a couple of my mom's architecture and artwork. So here at the UW, in internship and residency, as you know, we sort of now have this 3-hospital system. On Card A as an intern, Catherine Otto was my attending. The structure was very different now. I know some of you rotate, or rather work over at UW, but at the time, the same 4 resident teams took care of both the Card A and Card B patients. So we'd round on the Card A folks, and then meet up with the Card B attending and round on those patients, which was challenging because, of course, they would already have kind of formulated a plan for the day for those folks, because it was often well into the morning before we'd get to those patients. Marshall Corson, who you guys, of course, all know, was one of my attendings here, and actually there was like a split system there too with MICU and cards, so going through 2 rounds then, but really enjoyed working with both Catherine and Marshall, and had talked at the end of the Card A month to Catherine about my desire to pursue cardiology and geriatrics. The Providence Hospital, which is now part of Swedish, was an independent hospital back then that we also rotated, and it was sort of our only private hospital kind of experience. And I was actually there as a senior resident in Morning Report when the Nisqually earthquake hit, and remember very well seeing cracks show up in the walls there and getting under the desks during Morning Report.
Hey, Michael, just to jump in, you've got about a minute left.
Okay. So I was also granted some research time that I did with Mickey Eisenberg, who's now an emeritus professor in the emergency department. Tom Ray also helped out, although he was not on this paper, on the impact of AEDs in the home on post-MI patients. In my residency class, there are a number of names of people who have remained in the UW system, who many of whom I'm sure you guys recognize, all of whom are more accomplished than me. And many of these folks were in our at least monthly game nights that we would get together for. So I did a combined essentially fellowship in geriatrics and then cardiology during my Geri year. My son was born. This is a picture from ski day with my fellow fellows and other folks. You can see Catherine here, Kelly Branch back there. Here's Karen. We were 6 folks, 3 of whom were named Chen. And the same year that the first YouTube video was uploaded, that's how old I am, I was hired by Rick Page and Marshall to join the faculty here. And while here, I've done work with the AHA Older Populations Council and the corresponding ACC group, and have focused most of my time on academic work on issues of older patients with cardiovascular disease, including this paper on stress cardiomyopathies, which is why I'm always commenting on stress cardiomyopathies. Zhao, as I mentioned, has been a great mentor for my participation in some research projects as well. And my most recent sort of big review dealt with geriatric issues in patients with or being considered for implanted rhythm devices. And then over the years, I've published a number of case reports as well. So you guys know what I do. Things you may not know, I spent 10 years teaching in the HuBio sort of preclinical cardiovascular sequence. I've been on the rank order committee for the medicine residency for about 12 years. I'm on the editorial board and section editor in a couple of journals. And I have a current research project that maybe I'll tell you guys about at another time. And I've given surprisingly around 150 talks, which is a lot for somebody who doesn't like to hear themselves speak. In my free time, I like to be outside, running, hiking, pre-pandemic in a volleyball league, and a lot of photography while doing some of these things outdoors. The thing I take the pictures most of, though, is my son playing Ultimate, which is a fun pastime as well. And he just graduated from college last month. And yes, he is very much aware that he is taller than me, as am I. And that's it.
Thank you, Michael. That was amazing presentation. Wow. I'm speechless. We've got just a couple minutes for questions from the audience.